This is Designing the Revolution. You're listening to Chapter 27, Assemblies and Ecstasy. It's Part 3. Okay, so I think I've got this organised. There's going to be four parts to this section on assemblies, and in the first two episodes, we talked about the sort of theoretical ideas, this big breakthrough, as you might say, in how we organise democracy. So we were looking at the nature of democracy, these different elements once you start breaking it down, representation, who sets the agenda, the need for deliberation to talk about things. And then we've got this breakthrough proposition, right? Which is exciting because we've got something new for the 21st century, not just rehashing all the old ideas. So it's a new idea, which obviously is a really old idea, but it's new, let's put it like that, which is having sortition, selecting people by chance. That means you take out the corruption, you take out money, influence and all this sort of stuff, and you've got a space for deliberation, so people in principle make more rational pro-social decisions. All right, so this is a major breakthrough. We're not saying it's going to be utopia, but it's better than, as I said, rehashing all the old dilemmas and problems and what have you. All right, so in this episode we're going to hit the real world, because it's valid and important to do theoretical work, to create an ideal type of something that is new. But as we all know, everything that exists in a context. There's stuff around it. And in a social situation, you're going to say, okay, we're going to do assemblies, and then when and where, in 2023 in the UK. Okay, so if you're going to do it in that context, there's all these different elements, right, that are knocking around, which are fairly unique, which didn't necessarily exist 20 years ago, and such like. And if you go and do another country, maybe it's slightly different. And this particular context, as we've discussed many times in these episodes, is an objectively revolutionary context, in the sense that it's not a classical reformist context where the system is objectively functional. There's some problems. You pay something to an NGO, you have political parties, they trundle along. Sometimes they sort things out, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to do a little campaign. But fundamentally, objectively, or at least in terms of how people see it in society is fundamentally okay, and you're just changing bits of it, issues, campaigns and such like. Then you have the sort of revolutionary period where the whole system's collapsed and you've got a new regime, a new political regime in more full-on revolutions. You've got a social transformation as well. There's chaos, there's lots of new ideas, really good potentialities, really bad potentialities, right? And then you've got what we might call this pre-revolutionary period where the system is already dead, right? It's sort of a zombie system, and it is inevitably going to collapse. And in the old days, people would say it was inevitable because of social dynamics, which, arguably were likely, but not necessarily inevitable. And in the present context, it's because of the ecological, physical system that we're in, which objectively is going to collapse for the same reason that ice melts when it's hot, right? It's an impinging objective system that is going to destroy our capitalist economy, because the capitalist economy is destroying the basis of life, the physics and the biology on which we rely. Okay, so we've been talking about this enough, and you can look at previous episodes to go into that in greater depth. So the particular point here is in the pre-revolutionary episode in social history, what often happens is that the elites, the regime, the king or whatever, will appropriate various democratic institutions or democratic innovations in order to prop up the regime. In other words, it's a performative, manipulative appropriation routine. So, for instance, before the English Revolution in the 17th century, the king held parliaments, come on, I need some money, we need to talk about this. It was all a ruse. The only reason he wanted it was to get some legitimacy, some money. As soon as it was done, that was it. He got rid of the parliament, or if the parliament caused a fuss, he'd get rid of it. And you saw this, in lots of systems which are coming under massive stress. It's like you invite the enemy in, as it were. It's a bit like the Romans inviting the barbarians in before the collapse of the Roman Empire. Now, what we've got in the present moment is this, what you might call democracy industry. No disrespect if someone from it is listening to this, which they may well be. But in a reformist period, you're trying to promote this new democratic innovations, which is, assemblies, citizens' assemblies, sortition, all well and good. And you're trying to persuade the elites to do it, the governments to do it. So the governments, are fairly resistant. But then there's this pre-revolutionary moment when the governments, the system starts saying, well, maybe we can use this new democracy to strengthen our rapidly weakening position. So then they will hold, the government, the local authorities will hold a participatory budgeting assembly, or they'll have a national assembly on nature, or there's going to be something on climate change. But it's all phony. It's necessarily phony because if people ask for what they actually want, the system cannot give it, ideologically and materially, as you might say. So what happens is that the process of manipulation and the process of inauthenticity, as it were, is produced through three interlocking moves. The first move is to set the agenda. So it's like, we're going to talk about climate change, but we're not going to have Roger Hallam on, right? We're not going to talk about rape and slaughter and murder. What we're going to do is do this very repressed, liberal, NGO-esque, we've got a problem here, let's try and fix it together sort of routine. So they're setting the agenda, what's appropriate to talk about, what's not appropriate to talk about, and also the ambience of it, right? It's not just what the subject is, it's the feel, do people get upset? No, they don't. It's everyone wearing ties, yes. It's the, really everything's fine in terms of the communication system. Secondly, they don't publicise it. Someone said, we need a citizens' assembly. They don't want to publicise it because, we don't want to get the mob, as it were, the common people getting the idea they can have citizens' assemblies. So this is something that's happened in the UK. Some NGOs ask the government for an assembly, go, oh yes, all right then. And, there's a sop. But no one knows what it is. I think there was one on climate change and 5% of the British public knew about it. And then there's another move which is applies more to, like, there was a French citizens' assembly on the climate crisis. And to give them the credit, the French state, the French regime, Macron, ostensibly were into it, and maybe they thought they were into it, who knows. And it did have quite a lot of publicity and lots of people met, and, the agenda was obviously somewhat restricted. You'd expect that. But the point is they came out with, I don't know what it was, 100 different proposals. And don't quote me on this, but I think something like 10, for the sake of argument, 10 were enacted because it was a lie, right? The system itself is incapable of doing what is necessary to stop the climate crisis within the confines of an international corporate capitalist system, which is geared towards growth, and a cultural system that is addicted to material prosperity, in inverted commas. So this has it creates a big problem, because, as I've tried to indicate a few times during these episodes, it's this agonizing, excruciating tension between this reformist logic, which is let's stay in the system, we'll persuade the government, let's have another assembly, let's make the assemblies better, and the revolutionary perspective, which is saying at best you're irrelevant and at worst you're recreating and perpetuating the lie which everyone subconsciously or even increasingly consciously knows, which is the system is fucked. And so you're denigrating the proposition of deliberative democracy by being involved with the state in 2023 when we're going over 2 degrees and all the rest of it. During a reformist period, maybe that's a cool idea. At this point, it's a terrible idea, right? At best, it's irrelevant. At worst, you're creating even greater social alienation against the system and against any form of democracy. And incidentally, just as an aside, this is quite a common sort of observation about the degeneration of democracies is democracies become more corrupt, they're taken over by elites. The elites say it's democracy, but people know it's not real democracy because they're not allowed to talk about what they want to talk about. They're not allowed to get what they really want to get. And this is what creates a sort of popularist, reactionary, self-destructive dynamics. And people vote in a dictator because they're saying the dictator's better than this disgusting, fucked sort of liberal nonsense that we're all going to get richer when self-evidently we're not. If we're going to have a lie, let's have the real lie, right? Let's have a party before we all die. Let's have a fascist dictatorship. Let's scapegoat people and, all this ugly dynamic. So my argument is at this point in time, putting this theoretical edifice, as it were, this theoretical proposition of assemblies, citizen assemblies, into the existing system is done, right? What we need to look at is creating it through popular mobilisation. So this phrase, I think, comes from David Gray, but I might have mentioned it right. The mob learns to reason. So the elite democracy space only wants the mob to sort of half think about things, right? They don't want the mob, i.e. the ordinary people, to actually start creating their own agendas. They don't want a rude awakening. They don't want people shouting out of turn. They want everything nicely controlled in a bourgeois sort of way. So there's an important aspect to this which is quite complicated. So hopefully I'm going to explain it sufficiently, which is that the system maintains itself culturally and psychologically by saying that it represents democracy, it promotes democracy, it knows what the public wants, and the public wants what it wants, and such like. But the reality is that this is not the case. So all these words which are used by the system start losing their meaning. The public, opinion, the public sphere, democracy. And then there's this guy Foucault, who I'm sure many of you know. And Foucault and similar scholars like him made this point that how a regime maintains itself is by claiming that it is the reality and there's no other reality. So I've been listening to Mark Fisher recently, another guy some of you may know, capitalist realism, which is, it's not like we're right and they're wrong, right? It's we're right and nothing else exists. It's not even possible to think about something that's wrong, right? Because we are democracy. We have arrived. There's no alternative to the neoliberal system, like this Tina idea. There's no alternative. And what I would see as like the house slaves to this system is the democracy space, right? What I mean by that is the way this maintains itself is not through the bad guys telling the people this. It's by the good guys, like the reformists, buying into that logic and then telling ordinary people there isn't an alternative. You've got to do a citizen assembly through the state. There isn't a common sense outside the common sense of the regime. And of course, this is massively successful, it's like pretty obvious. This is what you should do if you're a regime. But as a regime becomes objectively stressed in the sense that it contradicts itself in its own terms. So, for instance, like you may have a regime which is saying we want everyone to become richer, and the opponents of the regime say being richer isn't going to make you happier, but you need to do something else. Well, that's one thing. But let's say there's a regime that says, I want to make you all richer, but everyone's getting objectively poorer. That's a contradiction within the terms of the regime itself. So as a regime is about to collapse, it becomes contradictory within its own terms. So we see this, at the moment in autumn 2023 with the Tory government. Everything it says it believes in is contradicted by the product of what it's actually doing. Capitalism is breaking down, the free market's breaking down, corporate tyranny is increasing, people are getting poorer, not richer, and all the rest of it. So the move here is for a group of revolutionaries, self-understood as revolutionaries, who use the word revolution, to go into the public space and create assemblies which explicitly are a weapon of transformation. So this old liberal idea that citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies are like neutral, the people come together, they objectively look at things. It's like, no, there's a new common sense. The new common sense, the new majority, the new notion of democracy is that the old system is totally corrupt, it's monstrous, it's an imposition, it's destroying the basis of life. So this new revolution is like, in a way, a conservative reaction, which is one of these great paradoxes about the revolutionary history, right? That many revolutionaries in many ways could be described as conservatives because they're trying to preserve the social space, social connectivity from the onslaught of the alienating effects of economic collapse, war, climate collapse, right? It's like this nightmare is being created, and this nightmare is being called democracy, and we're all being polite and bourgeois and all the rest of it, but it's not. So it's this emperor without clothes thing. So the strategy here, the revolutionary strategy, is in this particular context, the pre-revolutionary context, is to say who you are. We're revolutionaries. We're going to set up this assembly. And the reformist forces are house slaves. That needs to be said. They're not your friends. They're not going to do what it says on their tin. They're not going to enable you to influence the government because the government is controlled by capital. What we have to do is to create this revolutionary ecology, as you might say, right? Which is grassroots people setting up assemblies, having street movements that explicitly support them. The street movements do high-level civil disobedience, disrupting party conferences, disrupting politics as usual. And they've got it like on their chest, we are revolutionary, we want a completely different system. So that this new messaging is permeated through the system. And as we know from revolutionary history, initially, this is like seen as a total disaster. You're irrelevant at best, you're destroying the alliance of reformist forces at worst. But subliminally and increasingly consciously, people are going, no, those guys are the real guys because they're being fearless, because they're being authentic, because they're actually saying the emperor has no clothes. And so more people will start coming to the assembly. And it builds up from there. So I just want to give a little example here of the Russian peasantry during the 19th century and the early 20th century. So this process for the sake of argument, happened over, 2 or 3 generations. Then in the mid-19th century, you had this classical revolutionary move where middle-class revolutionaries, their revolution failed. They decided to go to the people, as this phrase goes, which has been done many times in many different contexts. And going to the people meant going to the peasantry. So it's like, we've got these great ideas, but it needs to become a mass movement. It needs to be a general mobilisation. We need the people on our side. The people need to know that their objective interests, as you might say. So the story is, they went to the peasantry and ended up getting shot and killed and what have you, because the peasantry were embedded in a medieval, reactionary, conservative, the Tsar's the next thing to God sort of paradigm. That's all they'd known. They hadn't been exposed to any new ideas. Life was really hard, but it had a certain functionality at the church, bum. And the key point here is about persistence. So there was various ebbs and flows of this. But by the time you got to the late 19th century, you started making some inroads. And the inroads were partially because these new ideas were coming in about liberty and equality and solidarity and secular ideas that, God isn't going to save you and blah, blah, blah. But also you got this capitalistic assault on the traditional way of life, introduction of market mechanisms, people being disrupted, people having to go to cities, families being split up and such like. And then as the process went in this pre-revolutionary phase, you got 2 factors. You got the intensity of this capitalistic assault, these elements becoming even more extreme, social connectivity is breaking down, more people going to the cities, people starving in the cities because, there's a big war or something like in 1905. And all this starts creating this churn, this psychic fluidity amongst the Russian peasantry, where they start going, well, hang on a minute, maybe these revolutionaries are actually on our side after all. And so that's like a middling period. And that's where we're at the moment in 2023. It's like, these just up oil people, they're twats, but hang on a minute, maybe they're sort of right because it's not looking too good out there. And then you have the end game. The end game for the Russian peasantry is World War I. And it's like, hi, I'm the Tsar. You guys, you're going to go and beat the Germans, but we're so totally disorganized. We're not going to even give you rifles. There's no food. You're just going to be slaughtered by the million. It's just a total shit show. And by 1916, 1917, the peasantry has become a revolutionary class. It's like, that's the nail in the coffin. So we can sort of envisage when there's massive food shortages in Britain and people are literally going a fortnight without food. It's like, that's it. You get this big inflection point and your average white van driver is going to go, I'm joining a revolution, I'm over this crap. This is it, So what we're seeing with the space of assemblies and citizen assemblies and people's assemblies is we're seeing this transformation arguably happen within 20 years, not in 2 or 3 generations, from 2010 through to 2030, which is where you've got the intensification of economic stress, economic alienation. No one's getting richer anymore. The rich are running off with all the cash. The stupidity of reformism, the psychosis of the Tory party in the UK of the right, and this massive loss of trust and distractions into populism and right-wing populist sort of modes of looking at the world. And the space of the assembly is being appropriated by these reformist forces. No one particularly likes them. It's not going anywhere. And then you've got this revolutionary moment, this revolutionary strategy where we're coming into that space. We're reappropriating the citizens' assembly, the people's assembly, in the context of we've set up this assembly today because we believe this country needs a revolution. And initially people, someone said to me the other day, people will walk out. So you've got the walking out phase where people walk out because that's reformist. Then you've got this phase where people don't know whether they want to walk out or not. Probably they're not because they're curious, because they think, maybe these guys have got a point. And then you've got the end game where they're standing up and clapping at the beginning of the assembly because someone actually has said how fucked we are and we need a fucking revolution. It's like, yeah, that's what we want. Right, let's have an assembly, let's get on with it. So you can see how context is massively important here in terms of strategic prediction. We're not talking about some sort of imposed ahistorical dogma, citizen assemblies are always this, they're always that. No, they're a weapon of the system or they're a weapon of the revolution. They're not a neutral space in some sort of, timeless bourgeois dream world, as you might say. All right, so let's just, before we finish on this, let's just drill down a little bit on a bit more of the details, right? So there's two sort of dynamics which I think are important on how the citizens' assembly, people's assemblies fit into this ecology of revolutionary change coming up in the next few years. So one thing is, and we're going to talk about this more, I think I'm going to do an episode on the plan where we're going to look at it, the plan in more details. But broadly speaking, what we can say is the initiation of creating people's assemblies, all around the country. It has to be synergized with a street movement, an existing civil resistance movement, which is promoting that frame. We need assemblies. So we tried this a little bit with Extinction Rebellion. We're going to, do civil disobedience and we want citizens' assembly, but it was all a little bit lame. It wasn't quite worked out. It didn't have vigour. This has to have vigour, right? It's like you've got a people's movement, which starts off as something quite unpopular, like Just Stop Oil, but it grows in credibility as things get worse. And that's out there, getting on the news saying, we want no new oil, and we need a fucking assembly in this country, guys. The system needs to change, otherwise we're dead. So that then synergizes and feeds into these assemblies, and these assemblies, as I said, have this revolutionary frame. And then, as we'll talk in a future episode, you're going to get these cultural figures. At the start, you're just going to get one or two, sort of odd bod guys who've reached 50 and have made enough money and don't really care what people think of them. But increasingly, you get these second movers coming in who are going, oh my God, we're in a mad panic. I'm going to give you some money. I'm going to publicise, your assemblies, your civil disobedience. And then you've got these standing in elections. The standing in elections is initially like performative, it's a direct action. You're not going to get many votes. It's sort of like, hey, we're here. It's a form of getting publicity and attention. And then increasingly, get to this inflection point where people are actually going to go, actually, that guy's more sensible than, bloody Labour Party. And you get this tipping point and maybe they get elected. So you've got the assemblies embedded in the civil resistance, amplified by the cultural figures and going into the electoral system, not as being appropriated by it, but to agitate within it for its removal, for its destruction, so that we can have this new constitutional arrangement of citizens' assemblies running a country, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. So we're going to be developing these themes a lot more over the next 2 or 3 episodes. But you can see this is the strategy, right? The strategy is, yes, you're explicit about being revolutionary, and you've got this organisational strategy that all these things need to be connected together. And then let's look at actually the site of conflict, as it were. What actually happens? Okay, so let's choose an episode, something that actually happens as an example, what could happen in various sort of situations. You create a citizens' assembly. So you have your revolutionary group. We're going to have a citizens' assembly. Great. You raise some money, some guilt-stricken rich person, gives you some money, £100,000, £200,000. You get your sortition process sorted out. You've got your 100 people. Maybe you've got 140 people. Some of them are going to hear about you and go, we don't want to do that, maybe. But you've got 100 people. You're going to be super nice to them. We're going to talk about this in the next episode. They have the assembly. The right-wing press says, hang on a minute, this cult leader Roger Hallam's organising it, or, this terrible revolutionary terrorist eco mob trying to pervert democracy. Terrible, everyone should ignore it. So the reformist logic, and I've talked to people about this, and some people watching this know, right? You talk to the reformist space and they say, this is terrible, you're going to destroy the reputation of citizens' assemblies, you're going to push us back 10 years, you're trying to make these things respectable, you're going to get crushed. It's reformist defeatism. You cannot go against the system because the system is all powerful because of capitalist realism. We've had 30 years of this conditioning, right? But they're wrong, right? Because history changes and sometimes the unexpected happens, and the unexpected can be predicted, broadly speaking, when you're in an objectively pre-revolutionary mode. So what actually happens, this is the proposition, what actually happens is the right-wing press say, terrible, everyone should ignore that. That's great. Why is that great? Because everyone in the country is talking about it. Is this some left-wing plot, is this rubbish? Or is it actually the people starting the mob, what's the phrase, the mob learns to reason. And so you've got these two frames battling it out. And of course, the official space was already decided. This is nasty revolutionary. Everyone should ignore it. But down the pub or late at night where people are thinking about it, or 3 o'clock in the morning, actually people are going, actually, this is pretty cool. In other words, like, it backfires because the process of them trying to destroy the citizens' assembly idea amplifies it beyond their wildest dreams, because you've got 10 million people talking about it in the country. And it doesn't matter that 80% of them are going, yeah, that's pretty rubbish. Because 20% of them are going, actually, that's great. And we want to hold one in Hull. We want to hold one in Frankfurt. We want to hold one in Pisa. All across the Western world, people going, I want to do that. Great. So this is where the massive backfire that we've, talked about in previous episodes. And this is like the moment of truth, as it were. Like there's these moments of truth in history. The optics is when, for the sake of argument, the electrician comes out on the steps after the assembly, and the electrician, out of all authenticity, as it were, as a working class bloke, says, I thought this was all rubbish, but it wasn't actually. It was ordinary British people in UK context. This was ordinary people of this country making decisions. And this is the decision we made. And I changed my mind, and I agree. And this is what it is. And then this is the killer moment, is when he goes, and I don't care about the Daily Mail. I don't care about the right-wing press. I used to read them. I used to agree with them. But you know what? They're wrong, right? They don't represent the people. We represent the people. Bang! Like, that's the moment when the whole thing flips, right? The emperor without clothes is shown not to represent the public, not to represent democracy. We represent democracy, through the visceral actuality of an actual assembly. And these 100 people are coming out, and they've just got ordinary clothes on, and they're not posh, and 20% of them are black, and 80% of them are working class, and 50% of them from the north of the country, and they're all talking to the media and going, yeah, I'm just an ordinary person doing this stuff, and you know what, this is what we want in this country. It's a massive revolutionary moment, and that's what you've got to risk by pre-framing it already as a revolutionary moment, right? And the revolution is not, then people start talking about the revolution, right? And, I was talking to some big ex-Tory politician, you'll probably know who he is, and the discussion came up. I said, oh, look, I'm a revolutionary. And so they just brought up all these tropes, that revolution means tearing things down. It means, chaos. And I was going, no, it doesn't. What's tearing things down is capitalism. What's building things up is a revolution. It's reasserting the conservative desire for order and connectivity and community and rationality and compassion. The system is the revolution in that sense, right? The system is what's tearing down society. And it's when that flip happens through all this contestation around citizen assembly, around, civil resistance, that's when the conversation, and you only need to have a conversation in a pre-revolutionary period for about 5 minutes, right, with an average person, and then you get it. They're on your side. The only reason they're not on their side is because of the whole social media situation. So I just leave you with this sort of this dynamic, just a sort of cousin of this dynamic, as you might say, it's a relative of it, which is the Brexit scenario. So what happened in the Brexit scenario, broadly speaking, is what intelligent elites do as one of their main moves, which is they appropriate revolt in order to reinforce reaction. So how that works, and loads of people have done it, so it's not unique. They create a movement which has the pretense of it being democratic, a pretense of it being a people's movement, and then it actually becomes democratic, and it becomes a people's movement, and it enacts a reactionary proposition, which is, to leave the European Union. And the move here is to appropriate democracy. In other words, when the liberal space said, no, this isn't right, they could just do the winning card, which is, well, this is what the people of Britain have voted for. They voted for Brexit, tough tits, It's like you've lost. It's a checkmate move. So what you can sort of see a similarity here with the Citizens' Assembly is what the progressive popular left has to do. Say, here's the Assembly, this is what they've decided, so fuck off, right? We're democracy, we're the people now. And you'll notice that you get the pro-social outcome through the Citizens' Assembly format, in other words, through a deliberative format. You don't get a pro-social outcome through direct democracy, through a referendum, because in a referendum, the social space is dominated by the corporate system, by social media, because people only think about it for 5 minutes. You think about, Europe for about 5 minutes. Yeah, there's loads of things wrong with Europe. Yeah, let's have a change. Let's kick the establishment. Okay, I'm voting for Brexit, right? There's a world of difference between that form of democracy, right, and the form of democracy where people sit down and say, okay, let's look at refugees. Talk to a refugee for half an hour. Talk for someone whose, relatives have drowned in the Channel. Even if you're coming into that assembly as a, fairly happy-go-lucky bloke, that white van driver, after an hour, unless you're really weird, you're going to be going, fuck, yeah, that's really bad. We need to do something about it. All right, so, yeah, this is the sort of rude awakenings part of these 4 parts, right? This is the third part. It's like we're hitting the real world here. It's not pretty. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be contestation. But this is not a theoretical set of episodes. This is what we need to think about. All right, so hopefully we've got strategic ducks in a row and how we're going to introduce these assemblies into the public space. And what I'm going to do in the next session is, okay, let's look at the actual nuts and bolts of creating assemblies, because the devil's in the detail. What's the quality of the deliberative process? Which is crucial, right, if you're going to get pro-social outcomes. So we're going to look at that next, and then I'm going to do a big summary of the plan to take power, which is sort of fun, isn't it? All right, that's it. Thanks.